And we're going to look at people who you see in the news who are trying to tell you that they're feeling a certain feeling and emotion. We're going to pick it apart and see, is that really true or not? Now, I do this sort of work with individual corporations, with companies who maybe are CEOs at one hand. On the other hand, I also work with weather forecasters on television, because a weather forecaster normally is not a meteorologist. It's some guy who's working at the station. But they've got to be believable and credible. So when you listen to the weather, it sounds like the weather might be true. I also work with professional actors, professional liars, such as lawyers and accountants, and others who maybe, in the case of a lawyer has to defend somebody when the lawyer may well know that person did the crime, but their job is to defend them and put up a case of reasonable doubt. So when you look at people, can you work out what's going on in the scene? Now, if you've got a female brain, doesn't necessarily mean you're a woman, because 1 in 5 men has a female brain. In fact, 3 out of 5 of you men in the room, you have XY chromosomes, you look like a man, and you think like a man. That's your operating system. 1 out of 5 of you look like a man, but you're thinking like a woman. Now, this doesn't mean you're gay. There's a greater chance that could be the case, but it means that you're probably a straight guy who makes friends quickly, you talk a lot, and can't remember where you parked your car, and you keep hitting things. That's 1 in 5 men. 3 out of 5 men look like a man, think like a man. 1 in 5 is in between. They're the hardest group to pick. For women, it's about the same statistic. 3 out of 5 of you have 2 X chromosomes. You look like a woman and you think like one. 1 in 5 of you look like a woman, you think like a man. And you're living with the guy who thinks like a woman. Did you know that? In fact, if you think of all the relationships you know with people, 1 in 5 relationships of couples you know, she's really the guy and he's really the woman. And you probably say to yourself, how does that work? Well, it does, because it's a female brain is attracted to a male brain despite the body it's sitting in. Does that make sense? And the reason for this, which we'll come back to later, this is one of my favourite scenes. Donald Trump's first year of presidency, he spent a lot of time talking about European leaders and how these guys were a complete waste of time. They're spending all this money on stupid things like the Paris climate change. They're spending things on trade wars. And America, he says, we're not going to be involved in that. We're getting out of that. We're sick of being ripped off by you, is what he said. And then he turned up for his first meeting at the first NATO meeting. Now, when you look at this scene, you'd probably draw the conclusion that the people on the right-hand side of the screen, such as Arbe, these are his friends who are backing him up. On this side, we can say these are not his friends who are not happy with the fact that he's there. And I wrote about this online, which went very viral, what I said about this, and Donald Trump saw it and replied to it, and he said, no, the guy got it wrong, that's not what it is. He said, we were talking about holiday vacations in Europe. Now, does this look like a holiday vacation Europe conversation to you? No, because 60 to 80% of all the impact of messages sent face-to-face by these people and by you is non-verbal. It involves no sound at all, 60 to 80%. So 2/3 to 3/4 of how you come across to someone is the way you look, appear and behave. And people who meet you for the first time form up to 90% of their impression about you in under 4 minutes, which means if you screw up the first 4 minutes, you are going to struggle to get people on side. Now, business today in India, as it is everywhere else in the world, is no longer about products. What's it about? Well, it's about people. It's about people. If you can sell yourself to people, if somebody buys you, they feel comfortable with that. They feel like you're not threatening, you're not intimidating, that you kind of understand them. If they buy you, there's a good chance they'll buy whatever goes with you. Now, the opposite's true too. If they don't buy you for some reason, for whatever reason, we're going to talk about some of these reasons, if they don't buy you, they'll fight to want to resist and reject and even say no to what you want, even if it's a good idea, purely because they don't feel a connection. I'm not quite sure how Donald Trump felt about this. It's a frozen moment in time. The key here is that we're not really quite sure what his wife's doing. You've probably got a bit of an idea. But the fact is, he's just about breaking her fingers there, dragging her forward. So he's got a bit of a clue about what could be going on here. A very famous handshake that took place about 2.5 years ago. For the last 40 years, every American president has, without success, tried to bribe, sanction North Korea to tell them to stop fighting rockets. In fact, they bribed them with $280 billion, and what happened, the North Koreans used that $280 billion to make more rockets. Then they tried to sanction them into obscurity, and that didn't work. So Donald Trump took the interesting precedent of turning up and buying this guy lunch. Now, that was a really important thing to understand what happened there. For 40 years, they'd done no good with Kim Jong-un or his father or his grandfather. Donald Trump turns up, buys lunch, puts it on his own credit card, cost him $550 for lunch. And suddenly, Kim Jong-un is his biggest fan. And he stops firing rockets at the rest of us, particularly us who live in the Southern Hemisphere, because he was threatening to blow us into the next century. So he stops firing rockets. Now, since then, he's fired 6 rockets that really haven't had much to do with anything. Nobody cares about them much, but he's pretty much given it up because he and Donald are like this. Now, this is not an equal leader relationship. This is a father-son relationship. And the interesting thing to look about this handshake is Donald's got his hand flat on his back like this. Now, I'm going to demonstrate how this works. Can I get this gentleman in the front row? Can you come and join me for a second, please? I'll show you how this works. You're likely today in business and social to go through this interesting piece of behaviour called a handshake. It's a Roman origin. Originally, it started 2,000 years ago like this. It's painted on Roman vases. It was done only between men. So leaders of the military, for example, stay there if you want to stay there, would meet and they would do this. Now, if his arm was stronger, it would go like this, and everybody say he has the upper hand. That's an ancient arm wrestling expression from the Roman era. Now, the upper hand was important because if he could get me like this, his soldiers had the first food, wine, dining, and dancing. My guys had to wait their turn. If it went the other way, my guys go first. So the idea was never to give in. Look them right in the eye and give a firm handshake, which became the basis of Western and then European handshaking. And when you shake hands with someone for the first time, you get one of the 3 gut feelings right here. Stay there, stay there. I'll show you what these feelings are. Okay, let's try this gentleman here. Okay, how's that feel for you?
I'm sorry?
You okay with that? Does that feel good?
Yeah.
That feels good, yeah. In fact, when I shook hands with him, I could see with his expression, the eyebrow flashed me and his teeth were visible. Instantly, he told me, and I could see that I could probably do business with him and it'd probably be okay. We're off to a good start. Let's try this gentleman. Okay, I'll just check the money. No, he didn't get any of that. Let's try this fellow here. Oh, yeah, he'll do whatever I want, this one. Now, that's not really how it happened, but that's how it happens in real life. One person, you feel like, this is going to be good. You don't know why, you just get a feeling. Second person, you think, watch it, they're coming on a bit strong. And the third person, you feel like, I'm in charge. It has to do with the angle of the hand and the strength. Now, in the original position, the hand on top was the winner. And that's still the way it is today. Now, how you know to decode that is still a bit of a mystery. We've got a few hypotheses, but we're not really sure. So when we lock hands, if his hand is slightly on top, it doesn't have to be right on, just a little bit will do it. I'll get a feeling here, he's coming on a bit strong. I don't even know why, just he's a little bit strong. Now, if it goes the other way, he'll get a feeling, I'm coming on a bit strong. So how do you create rapport with someone? When you meet someone, how do you create that effect that you and I had, sir, on the front row? Where suddenly when you lock hands, you say, this is going to go well. Here's what you do. Keep the palm straight and give the same pressure you receive. Now, this takes a bit of practice. Now, on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 is a knuckle grinder and 1 is breakfast sausages. Okay, so you're about a 7.
Okay,
That's
thank you.
right, 7. Well, it's not good or bad, it's just the way it is.
Okay.
Now, my default position is a 7 as well.
Okay.
So when we locked hands together, how'd that feel? It feels all right for me.
Okay.
Yeah.
We're equal.
Yeah, it feels very equal. So this guy and I are off to a good start. We're now looking for reasons why we might be able to cooperate with each other. Now, let's say this time you do your 7, I'll give you a 9. How's that?
Right.
What do you think about this?
Right.
Does that feel okay?
It's hurting.
It's hurting, okay. So as soon as I put up the pressure on, he starts thinking, I'm going to watch this. I'm going to watch this guy because something about him I don't like. What if I give you a 3?
You're soft.
Yeah, a bit soft. We make this association between strength of personality and handshake, which isn't exactly accurate, but we do make that. So to create rapport with someone, keep the palm straight. The next bit takes a bit of practice. Give the same pressure you receive. That takes a bit of practice, okay? Thank you for that. Give him a round of applause.
What do you do with a woman?
What do you do with a woman?
Woman?
What do I do with a woman?
Because,
I'll tell you
how
that.
do you
I'll
say-
tell you
how
that
do you say
privately. Well, that's a good question. What do you do if you're? What if you are a woman? You're going to meet some guy who's going to give you a 9. I'll put you into place, honey. Crunch. Well, if you're a woman, first thing is do not wear any jewelry on your right hand, Because if someone does give you a high level, 7, 8 or 9, if you've got jewelry there, you can draw blood if you've got a sharp stone there. And you start the transaction in shock and in pain. So with a woman, it's exactly the same, except the difference is if you're approaching a man and you're uncertain whether he's likely to initiate the handshake. Because every woman here has had a situation where you've been in a meeting, maybe like this in a group, and everyone's being introduced, and a new guy's introduced, and as he comes to you, you raise your hand to give a handshake, and he didn't see it. And so you're dangling in midair. Now, you think, now if I can pull this away, no, but maybe they won't notice. So as you pull it away, he sees it. Now he reaches, but it's gone. And so now he pulls back as you... Who's done this? Now, the reason that happens between men and women is because he wasn't sure what you were going to do and you didn't give notice. So if you're a woman, here is the secret for shaking hands, not only with men, but with anybody. In business, absolutely do this. As you're walking towards a person, start to bring the hand up before you get there. Give 3 steps. In other words, you're giving intention about what you're going to do when you arrive. Now, that's not how it looks, but it would look like this. So as you're coming forward, that means that this guy has 3 or 4 seconds to think through what's going to happen. You don't catch him by surprise, because the worst thing you can do with any man is just walk up to him and just whip it out. Because he mightn't see it. His vision is not tunnel to see down below 45 degrees. That leaves you dangling. So give notice of what it means. Now, what Donald Trump did with Kim Jong-un, which is extremely clever, he presented his hand with a palm up and said, "It's a pleasure to meet you." And he let Kim Jong-un... Even though, look, Kim Jong-un's like a kid in a candy store. He wouldn't have a clue what's going on here. But he's got his hand on top, and suddenly he feels like he's the king, he's the star. And the North Korean papers next day wrote, "Donald Trump is a great guy," because they let their dear leader have the dominant position, even though they didn't really know that's what was happening. And Donald Trump's done it a few times. In fact, Kim Jong-un is so impressed personally by Donald Trump. On their last meeting about 4 months ago, which didn't go that well, but in their last meeting, Kim Jong-un said he had instructed his hairstylist to make his hair look like Donald Trump. Now, how's that for after 40 years of trying to bribe and bully people? He buys Kim Jong-un lunch, and then Kim Jong-un wants to change his hairstyle to look like Donald. So I started to think, what if they both switched hairstyles? What would that look like?